Elena Morozova had grown up in a small farming village, where winter always arrived early, and hope always seemed a little late. Her family worked hard, but the land had grown thin, the crops tired, and the cold seasons lasted longer each year. Her father often said that their soil had given all it could, and now wanted to rest forever. Elena believed the same was happening to the people around her. Everyone seemed exhausted, everyone seemed to be waiting for something to change, but nothing ever did. Elena had never been afraid of hard work, but she was afraid of staying in the same place forever, watching her dreams fall asleep like the land. She wanted more than a tiny wooden house, with cracked windows and creaking doors. She wanted a life where she could breathe without worrying whether the next season would be kinder or harsher. She wanted a chance to stand on her own feet and make choices for herself. So when she heard from a friend about men in America searching for wives through letters, something strange sparked inside her. It sounded unusual, even risky, but also like a window opening in a room full of stale air. A man named George Tillman, a rancher in Montana, had placed an advertisement looking for a wife from overseas. He described himself as hardworking, successful, and ready to provide a comfortable life to a woman who would stand beside him. He promised safety, financial security, and a future. For Elena, that promise sounded like sunlight after a long winter. Her family had mixed feelings when she told them she wanted to go. Her mother wept quietly, worried about sending her daughter across an ocean to a man they had never met. Her father tried to stay strong, though she saw fear in his eyes too. But he also knew there were few opportunities left for her at home, and as he hugged her goodbye before she boarded the ship, he whispered, "Do not lose your voice there. Your spirit is your strength." She held on to that sentence during the long journey to America. When Elena finally arrived in Montana, she was shocked by the wide-open land. It felt endless. Fields stretched in every direction. The sky so big it looked like it could swallow the world. It was beautiful, but also intimidating. There were no crowds, no busy streets, no familiar sounds. Only wind, dust, and a quiet that felt both peaceful and lonely. George Tillman came to meet her with a firm handshake and a stiff smile. He was tall, with neatly trimmed hair and polished boots that looked like he cleaned them twice a day. He spoke politely, but there was something cold behind his eyes, something that made Elena straighten her back and remind herself not to shrink in his presence. The first hours on his ranch felt hopeful. George showed her the house, a large, well-built place, with big windows, sturdy walls, and plenty of room. It was far more comfortable than the home she had grown up in. He pointed to the kitchen, the pantry, the wash area, and explained the daily routines of the ranch. At first, Elena tried to listen carefully, telling herself that maybe she could build a peaceful life here. But as the days passed, the truth revealed itself. George did not want a partner. He wanted someone who followed instructions without question, someone who kept her opinions silent, someone who fit into his plans as neatly as furniture placed in a room. When Elena made suggestions about the house, he ignored them. When she asked questions about the ranch, he told her she didn't need to know. When she tried to talk about her thoughts or dreams, he called them unnecessary distractions. The first argument between them happened on her 4th day at the ranch. George had asked her to reorganize the kitchen shelves while he was out checking the cattle. She did reorganize them, just not in the way he wanted. When he returned and saw the jars arranged differently, he frowned sharply. "This is not how I keep things," he said. Elena explained calmly that she had arranged them by size, making everything easier to reach. She even demonstrated how quickly she could find things now. But George did not care about logic or comfort. He cared about control. "I asked you to follow my instructions," he said. "I expect to be obeyed." The word obeyed made something inside Elena freeze. It reminded her of all the stories she had heard about women losing their freedom in foreign lands. She had hoped her new life would be different. She had hoped he would be different. From that moment, their relationship turned tense. Every task she did became an opportunity for him to criticize her. If she cooked something slightly differently than he liked, he complained. If she spoke too loudly, he called it improper. If she asked questions, he said she was being difficult. Yet Elena refused to shrink. She kept her back straight, her voice steady, and her spirit bright. She remembered her father's words and repeated them silently whenever she felt discouraged. But her strength only bothered George more. One evening, after a long day of disagreements, he sat across from her at the dinner table and said, "I thought I was bringing home a wife. Instead, I brought home trouble." Elena felt the sting of his words, but she did not lower her eyes. "I came here to build a life," she replied calmly, "not to be treated like a command to be followed." George pushed his chair back sharply and stood. "You are too stubborn, Elena. This will not work." For a moment, she felt panic rising inside her. She had crossed an ocean for this new life. She had left her family behind. What would she do if he sent her away? How would she return home? But she also knew she could not change who she was just to please someone who refused to respect her. The next morning, without discussion, he informed her that he had arranged transportation to send her back. "You will leave in 2 days," he said, as casually as if he were talking about moving a piece of furniture. Elena felt a mixture of anger and sadness. She had tried her best to adapt, to compromise without losing herself. But in George's eyes, anything other than complete obedience was failure. The village wagon driver arrived early on the appointed day, ready to take her to the nearest train station. Elena packed her belongings slowly, each folded piece of clothing reminding her of the courage it had taken to come this far. She felt disappointment, but also a strange sense of relief. If this was how he treated her now, how would life with him have been years later? Perhaps she was escaping something far worse than a failed arrangement. As she stepped outside with her single suitcase, the Montana wind brushed her face. She looked at the vast land around her. It felt lonely. Yes, but also full of possibilities she had not yet explored. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, she allowed herself to breathe freely. The wagon driver loaded her bags and took his seat. Elena climbed up beside him, her heart heavy but her spirit still steady. She refused to cry in front of George, who stood with crossed arms, watching her like a problem finally being removed from his life. Elena met his gaze one last time, not with sadness, but with quiet strength. "Goodbye," she said simply. George did not respond. The wagon began to move, wheels rolling across the dusty road. Elena kept her chin up, refusing to let disappointment crush her. She did not know what waited for her in the next town, or whether she would be sent all the way back across the ocean. But she knew one thing for certain: she had not lost herself. And that truth gave her more comfort than any promise George had made. The road stretched ahead, long and winding. Elena watched the horizon, unaware that someone else, someone who valued not weakness but courage, would notice the fire in her spirit before the day was over. The wagon wheels rolled steadily along the dusty Montana road, leaving the Tillman Ranch farther and farther behind. Elena sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, trying to hold on to her courage. The air was cool and carried the soft scent of dry grass. The land around her stretched wide and open, as though the sky had no end. She tried to take comfort in the view, but her heart felt heavy. Everything she had hoped for in America had disappeared in just a few weeks. The wagon driver, Mr. Harris, was a kind, older man, with weathered skin and gentle eyes. He kept glancing at her as if he wanted to say something but didn't quite know how. "You hold yourself strong," he finally said softly. "Most folks would be crying right now." Elena offered him a small smile. "Maybe later," she replied. "Right now, I need to stay calm." He nodded, respecting her strength. "It's a long road," he said. "If you want to talk, I'm here." She appreciated his kindness, but her thoughts were too tangled for conversation. She simply nodded and returned to looking at the horizon. Her mind drifted between memories of home, the disappointment she felt, and the uncertainty of what would happen once she reached town. The wagon bumped over a patch of uneven ground, and Elena steadied herself by gripping the seat. Ahead, she saw a figure on horseback, a lone rider moving steadily across the field toward the road. As they drew closer, She could make out a tall man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. His posture relaxed, but confident. He guided his horse with ease, as though he had grown up in the saddle. When he reached the road, the rider slowed and tipped his hat politely to Mr. Harris. "Mornin', Harris," he greeted warmly. "Mornin', Caleb," Harris replied with respect. "Fine day, huh?" "Sure is." Caleb's eyes shifted to Elena, and his expression softened with curiosity. "Where are you two headed?" Before Harris could answer, Elena spoke in a calm, steady voice. "To the train station." Caleb nodded slowly, studying her as though he could sense there was more to the story. He didn't stare rudely, just long enough to understand that something wasn't right. He looked back at Harris, raising an eyebrow gently, silently asking without words. Harris cleared his throat. "George Tillman sent her back," he said quietly, as though the situation embarrassed him. Caleb's expression tightened. He didn't seem surprised, just disappointed. "Sent her back?" he repeated. Elena answered before Harris could continue, her voice steady but firm. "He did not want someone who thinks for herself." Caleb's eyes flicked toward her with something like respect. He didn't smile, but there was a warmth in his gaze that made her sit a little straighter. He seemed like a man who listened, truly listened. Something she hadn't experienced in weeks. "Well," Caleb said calmly, "I reckon thinking for yourself is not a bad thing." Harris gave a small chuckle. "Not everyone agrees." Caleb looked at Elena again. There was no pity in his eyes, only curiosity and a quiet admiration for the strength she carried. "Where are you from?" he asked politely. "Russia," she answered. "A small village far from here. That must have been quite a journey." His tone held gentle respect. "It was," she said. "And now it seems I must begin another one." Caleb shifted in his saddle, thoughtful. He didn't press her for details. He simply nodded, as though acknowledging that she had handled more than most people could. The wagon began moving again, and Caleb rode alongside for a few moments, matching their pace. He kept a comfortable distance so as not to make her uneasy. "You'll be safe in town," he assured her, his voice steady. "Folks, there are decent." "Thank you," she replied softly. But the conversation did not end there. Caleb glanced toward the Tillman ranch behind them, then back at Elena. "Tillman," he said slowly. "He ain't an easy man. That is one way to describe him," Elena answered, with a hint of humor in her tone. It was the first moment she felt even a small spark of lightness since leaving the ranch. Caleb's lips curved slightly, almost into a smile. It wasn't a full smile, but it was enough to make Elena notice the kindness in his face. He rode beside them longer than necessary, as though making sure she reached town safely. And though they exchanged only a few more sentences, she found herself observing him quietly. There was something steady about him, something grounded. He didn't speak loudly or act arrogantly. His confidence was quiet and natural, like the earth beneath their feet. After some time, Caleb slowed his horse. "I need to head back to the ranch," he said. "But if you need anything while you're in town, you can ask for Caleb Hart. Folks know where to find me." Elena nodded politely. "Thank you." She meant it more than he knew. He tipped his hat to her once more, then guided his horse away. She watched him for a moment, unsure why his departure made her feel a small tug in her chest. She barely knew the man, yet something about him felt safe in a way she hadn't felt since arriving in America. Harris noticed the direction of her gaze and chuckled softly. "Caleb's a good man. Hardworking. Honest. Don't talk much, but when he does, it's worth listening to." "He seems kind," Elena said simply. "He is," Harris confirmed. They continued down the road until they reached the small town. It was a quiet place with a handful of wooden buildings, a general store, a small inn, a bakery, and a train station. Elena climbed down from the wagon as Harris unloaded her suitcase. "You sure you'll be okay?" he asked gently. "I will manage," she assured him. Harris nodded. "If plans change and you need a way back to the ranch, well, not Tillman's ranch, but other places, I pass through often." His kindness warmed her heart. She thanked him sincerely before he drove off. The town was small but welcoming. A few people glanced her way, curious about the unfamiliar young woman standing with a suitcase. Elena walked to the boarding house, where a kind lady named Mrs. Brown welcomed her with a gentle smile. "Traveling alone?" Mrs. Brown asked in a warm voice. "For now," Elena answered. Mrs. Brown didn't pry, though her eyes filled with sympathy. She led Elena to a small room upstairs with a comfortable bed and a window overlooking the road. It was simple, but clean. Elena placed her suitcase on the floor and sank onto the bed, letting out a breath she had been holding for days. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. That evening, she visited the town bakery where the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. The baker, Mr. Phelps, handed her a warm loaf with a friendly nod. "New in town?" he asked. "For a short time," Elena replied. "Well, you're welcome here as long as you stay." She thanked him and returned to the boarding house with the bread. Town life was quiet, but the people were gentle, and that made her feel less alone. She sat by the window in her room, watching the sun dip behind the hills. But her calm was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. When she opened it, her eyes widened slightly. Standing there, holding a small bag of groceries, was Caleb Hart. He offered a shy smile. "Mrs. Brown told me you checked in," he said. "Thought you might need some things." "Find it." "Mrs." Elena blinked in surprise. "You came all the way here?" "For me? Figured it's tough settling into a new place with nothing but a suitcase," he replied simply. She stepped aside to let him place the bag on the small table inside the room. Apples, bread, soap, a warm scarf, simple items, but each one clearly chosen with care. "You did not have to do this," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "But it didn't feel right not to." His voice carried honesty that made her chest tighten with unexpected warmth. No one in America had cared about her choices or comfort until now. His kindness felt like sunlight she hadn't realized she needed. Caleb tipped his hat slightly. "If you need anything, I live just 10 miles south. People can show you the way." She nodded, not trusting her voice for a moment. "It was nice meeting you today," he added gently. "It was nice meeting you too," she managed. He gave her one last warm look before turning to leave. When he walked down the hallway and disappeared from sight, Elena closed the door quietly behind her. She stood there for a few moments, holding the scarf he had brought. It felt soft and warm between her fingers. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time since leaving her village, she felt a quiet hope blooming inside her. She had been sent away by one man, but perhaps, without knowing it, she had been guided toward. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the thin curtains in Elena's small room. She opened her eyes slowly, taking a moment to remember where she was. For the first time since arriving in America, she felt a tiny sense of calm. The town was quiet, almost peaceful, and she could hear faint sounds of people beginning their day. The distant whistle of the train, the clinking of dishes from the kitchen downstairs, and the muffled voices of guests getting ready to head out. She got dressed and stepped outside her room, carrying the scarf Caleb had brought her. She wrapped it around her neck even though the morning wasn't very cold. Something about it made her feel protected. Downstairs, Mrs. Brown greeted her warmly. "You slept well, dear?" "Yes, thank you," Elena replied. "Good. Breakfast is ready if you're hungry." Elena smiled. "I am. A little." She sat at a small wooden table by the window. Mrs. Brown placed a plate of warm biscuits, butter, and a cup of tea in front of her. The simple meal comforted her more than she expected. She missed her family, her village, and the feeling of belonging. But this morning, she felt a small piece of that peace returning. A few townspeople passed by the window outside, waving politely as they walked. Some had already heard whispers of her story, the mail-order bride who had been sent away. Surprisingly, no one treated her with pity or judgment. Instead, they greeted her with gentle kindness, as if they understood she had been through something difficult. After breakfast, Elena explored the town. She visited the general store, the bakery again, and a small shop where a woman sold handmade quilts. People asked simple questions where she came from, how long she planned to stay, but no one pressed her for details. Their respect helped her breathe easier. Still, her mind wandered back to Caleb. She remembered his calm voice, the thoughtful way he had looked at her, the kindness in his eyes. She wondered whether he had brought groceries because he felt sorry for her, or simply because he was naturally generous. The thought made her cheeks warm for a moment. In the afternoon, clouds began to gather, covering the sky with soft gray. A light wind blew down the street, lifting dust and leaves. Mrs. Brown mentioned that rain was coming and that storms could get strong around this season. As the wind grew colder, Elena pulled the scarf closer around her neck. She sat by her window, watching the road. She didn't expect to see Caleb again not so soon, yet something inside her hoped he might ride into town. But no one came down the road except wagons and townsfolk hurrying to finish their errands before the weather worsened. By early evening, rain began to fall in gentle drops, tapping softly against the window pane. Elena decided to go downstairs for supper. The boarding house dining room had a warm glow from the oil lamps, and a few travelers sat eating their meals quietly. She chose a seat near the corner and began sipping warm soup. Halfway through her meal, the front door opened, letting in a gust of wind. She looked up, expecting another guest, but her breath caught for a moment. Caleb stepped inside, brushing rain from his hat. He looked slightly surprised to see her, but quickly offered a warm smile. "Evening," he greeted. "Good evening," she replied softly. Mrs. Brown bustled over to him. "Out in this weather? You should have stayed on your ranch until the storm passed." Caleb chuckled lightly. "Had to pick up some supplies before they ran out." But his eyes drifted toward Elena in a way that suggested he had more reasons for coming than he admitted. He approached her table, carrying his hat in one hand. "Mind if I sit?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Please." He sat across from her, calm and relaxed despite the rain. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Elena felt strangely nervous, but not in an unpleasant way. Caleb, on the other hand, looked comfortable, as though sitting across from her felt natural. "How was your day?" he asked. "Quiet," she answered. "The town is peaceful. People are kind." "They are," he agreed. "You fit in well." Elena lowered her gaze shyly. "I am trying." Caleb watched her for a moment before speaking again. "What are your plans now?" She sighed softly. "I do not know yet. I may have to take the train soon. I am waiting for a letter from the agency to tell me what will happen next." Caleb nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Must be hard not knowing." "It is," she admitted. "But I feel safer here than I did before." "You should," he said gently. "This town might be small, but it has good people." There was something steady in his voice, something that made her believe him. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. After supper, the rain turned heavier. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off, and the lamps flickered slightly. Mrs. Brown insisted Caleb stay a little longer until the weather calmed. He agreed and joined Elena in the sitting room, where they sat near a small fireplace. For the first time, they talked for more than a few minutes. She told him about her village, her family, and how she had dreamed of finding a better life. She explained how she had hoped George would be a kind partner, someone who respected her. Caleb listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. His attention felt gentle, steady like an anchor she could hold on to. After she finished speaking, he took a slow breath. "I'm sorry you went through all that," he said softly. "You deserved better." His simple words carried more comfort than any long speech could have. Elena looked down at her hands. "Do you think I was wrong to speak up? To ask questions?" "No," he said firmly. "Asking questions isn't wrong. Wanting respect isn't wrong. George wanted someone who would never disagree. That's not a real partnership." Elena felt something loosen inside her chest, as though a knot she'd been carrying for weeks finally untied. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb leaned back slightly, watching the fire. "You're strong," he said. "Most people would have given up their voice just to stay comfortable. But you didn't." His words made her heart steady itself in a new way, a way she didn't fully understand yet. The storm continued outside, But inside the sitting room, everything felt calm, warm, safe. Eventually, the rain softened. Caleb stood and put on his hat. "I should head back," he said gently. "But if you need anything at all, you can send word." Elena stood as well, her hands clasped in front of her. "I will remember that." He nodded and stepped toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back one more time. "You have a good heart, Elena," he said quietly. "Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Then he left, disappearing into the soft rain. Elena returned to her room, her mind full of thoughts she couldn't quite untangle. She sat on her bed, touching the scarf lightly, remembering his words, his steady gaze, and the gentle warmth he carried. The next morning, word spread around town that George Tillman had been telling people Elena was too difficult and not worth the trouble. His comments reached the ears of the townsfolk and eventually reached Caleb too. Caleb did not stay silent. He confronted George in town, but not with anger or shouting. Instead, he spoke calmly, directly, defending Elena's dignity. He told George that everyone deserved respect, and that calling someone difficult for having opinions said more about the speaker than the person being spoken about. Many people witnessed the conversation and later told Elena how Caleb had stood up for her. She felt a wave of gratitude, surprise, and something deeper. A feeling she tried not to name too quickly. When Caleb visited her again that evening, she looked at him with a mixture of appreciation and disbelief. "You stood up for me," she said softly. "You deserved someone to," he replied. And just like that, something between them quietly shifted, something gentle and new, but strong enough to change both their lives. Almost every afternoon, she saw Caleb riding into town with supplies, deliveries, or simple errands. He always greeted her with a warm smile, one that felt honest and gentle. Sometimes they talked for only a few minutes. Sometimes they walked together through town, discussing small things, weather, crops, or stories from their childhoods. These conversations were simple, but they warmed her heart in a way that felt new and peaceful. The townspeople began to notice their growing friendship. They greeted Caleb with knowing smiles and welcomed Elena more warmly than before. No one teased, no one gossiped. They simply seemed happy that she was finding comfort in a place that once felt so foreign. One afternoon, after finishing her tasks at the boarding house, Elena walked to the small field just outside town, where she liked to sit and look at the hills. The grass moved gently in the wind, and the sky was wide and clear. She didn't hear Caleb approaching at first, but she felt his presence before she turned and saw him. He was walking toward her slowly, holding his hat in his hands. His steps were steady, his face calm but thoughtful. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "Of course not," she replied softly. He sat on the grass beside her, keeping a comfortable distance. For a while, they simply watched the hills together. The silence between them was not awkward, it felt peaceful, like both understood that some moments did not need words. Finally, Caleb spoke. "You've been here almost a week now," he said gently. "Has the agency said anything?" She shook her head. "No letter yet." He nodded, his jaw tightening slightly, not with anger, but with worry. "Do you want to go back?" Elena took a slow breath. "I do not know. I came here hoping for a new life. Going back feels like giving up. But staying, I am not sure what my place would be." Caleb turned his head toward her, his eyes warm. "You have a place here," he said softly. "In this town, with these people. And," he hesitated, the way someone does when choosing the most honest words. "And with me, if you want it." Her heart gave a small, unexpected jump. "With you?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb looked down at his hands. "I know we haven't known each other long, and I don't want to rush you or make you feel any pressure. But I like being around you. I like listening to you talk. I like the way you think, the way you see things. He paused again, collecting courage. "I care about you, Elena." The breeze moved softly between them. Elena looked at him in gentle surprise. She had not expected such honesty, such openness. In her life, she had rarely met a man who spoke with his heart so clearly. "I care about you too," she said finally. "More than I expected. But I am afraid." "What are you afraid of?" he asked gently. "That I will make the wrong choice again," she admitted. "That I will choose a life that will hurt me. That I will lose myself trying to belong." Caleb's expression softened. He moved his hand slightly closer but not touching hers. He was giving her the choice, showing her that he would never take her freedom away. "You won't lose yourself with me," he said quietly. "I don't want someone who folds themselves smaller. I want someone who stands strong. Someone who speaks. Someone like you." Her chest tightened with emotion, warm, hopeful emotion. But still, she hesitated. "What if the agency letter arrives tomorrow?" "Then you decide what you want," Caleb replied, "not what someone else wants from you. You can leave, and I will wish you every good thing in life. Or you can stay, and we can build something together, slowly, carefully, the right way. Not because you need a place, but because you choose it." His words settled into her heart like sunlight. She felt something shift inside her, a soft, growing certainty she hadn't felt in years. They stayed on the hill until the sky turned gold, speaking quietly about their dreams and fears. Caleb told her about his parents, who had always taught him that a good life is built with kindness. He spoke about the ranch, the cattle, the land he loved. He had wanted to share it with someone someday, but only with someone who valued partnership, not control. As evening fell, they walked back to town together. At the boarding house door, Caleb paused. "If the letter comes tomorrow," he said softly, "I'll be here, no matter what decision you make." She nodded, touched by the quiet steadiness in his voice. "Thank you, Caleb, truly." That night, Elena sat by her window for a long time. She watched the lamps flicker on the street, watched the stars appear above the rooftops, and thought about everything that had happened in the past few weeks. She thought about the fear she had felt at the ranch, the loneliness, the disappointment, and then she thought about Caleb, about his steady eyes, his gentle voice, the way he respected her thoughts, the way he listened, the way he had defended her without expecting anything in return. She realized something simple and clear. She felt safe with him not because he offered comfort, but because he offered understanding. He didn't try to change her. He didn't try to silence her. He didn't treat her as something he owned. He treated her as someone he valued. The next morning, sunlight filled her room. She went downstairs where Mrs. Brown was sorting the mail. Elena's heart tightened when she saw a letter in the woman's hand, an official envelope with the agency name printed on the front. Mrs. Brown looked at her with kind eyes. "This came for you, dear." Elena took the letter with trembling fingers. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. The whole room felt quiet and still, as though waiting with her. Finally, she opened it. The agency apologized for the situation and said they could arrange her return to Russia, or they could place her with another potential match in a different region. They asked her to respond within 2 days. Elena folded the letter gently and held it against her chest. She knew exactly who she wanted to talk to before making her decision. Leaving the boarding house, she walked toward the road leading south, the road that led to the Hart Ranch. She didn't hurry, but each step felt purposeful, steady. Halfway down the road, she saw Caleb riding toward town. When he noticed her walking, he slowed his horse and stopped beside her. "You got the letter," he said softly. "Yes," she replied. He dismounted and stood in front of her. "What did it say?" "That I can return home, or be matched with someone else." Caleb swallowed, his eyes searching hers. "And what do you want?" Elena took a steady breath, letting her heart speak clearly. "I do not want an arrangement," she said. "I do not want a match. I want a life I choose for myself." Caleb nodded slowly, listening with quiet patience. "And I want—" She paused, feeling warmth rise in her chest. "I want to stay here, in this town, near someone who sees me, who listens to me, who respects me." Caleb's breath caught softly. "Are you sure?" She smiled gently. "Yes, I choose to stay." His shoulders relaxed as though he had been holding something inside, waiting for her answer. A soft, grateful smile spread across his face. "I'm glad," he said quietly. "More than I can say." They stood together on the quiet road, the morning light warm around them. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. It felt natural, two hearts finding the same path. Over the next few weeks, Elena settled into town life. She worked part-time at the bakery, helped Mrs. Brown, and visited the Hart Ranch often. Caleb showed her the land, the horses, the peaceful hills. He never hurried their relationship. He let it grow gently, day by day, like a steady sunrise. And Elena found herself falling in love, not with the idea of a new life, but with the man who made that life feel possible. Months later, under a sky full of soft evening colors, Caleb stood beside her on the same hill where he had once confessed his feelings. "I want to build a life with you," he said, his voice full of quiet devotion. "Not because I need someone on the ranch, but because you are the person my heart chooses." Elena felt tears of pure happiness fill her eyes. "And I choose you," she whispered. "Not for safety, not for a home, but for love." They married in a small ceremony attended by the townspeople who had welcomed her so kindly. There were no grand decorations, no fancy speeches, just warmth, hope, and honest joy. Elena became Elena Hart, not by contract or arrangement, but by her own choice, made freely and with a full heart. And every day afterward, she thanked life for guiding her away from the doorstep of someone who did not value her straight into the arms of someone who always would.